Hi, this is Eva from the blog thecharmofit.wordpress.com, and I'm here to unpack my knitting basket yet again. You can find me on Ravelry and Instagram as The Charm of It, and I've also started a group for viewers of the podcast on Ravelry, which is also The Charm of It. So pretty much everywhere I've got the same username. I wrote myself some notes this time, so hopefully I won't forget about anything. First up, we have a question from Abby, who is Long Ride Home on Ravelry. Clearly I should have written my notes and slightly neater writing. Anyway, she was wondering about the specifics of how I buy yarn from other Ravelry members who are destashing. So I don't go to the destash forums. Instead, I search for whatever yarn I'm interested in, and then on the page where the yarn is, there are these little tabs, and one of them says stashes, and it has the number of everyone who stashed their yarn. And so I click on that, and then there's another box, like a drop-down menu right under the tabs, and the default is all. It's like status, and if you click on that, you can choose will trade or sell. And then as you're scrolling through, there's a little flag that shows you what country it's from. Most people list the price and whether that includes shipping or not. Some people don't. And so when I find yarn that I'm interested in, first I then click on that colorway, which brings up every stashed yarn in that colorway so I can get a better idea if I haven't seen the color in person, and I'll also pop over to projects and look at that colorway in the finished projects too. And then as long as I like what I see, I just message the person on Ravelry, and I've only had good experiences. I do look over their profile first to make sure that they're, people, I guess. But I haven't had any problems, and people have always sent the yarn out really quickly. I always pay via PayPal. You can do the goods and services option, which gives you some protection in case you don't get the yarn. But as I said, I've always had nothing but good experiences. So, yeah, that's how I do it. I described this in an earlier post in the comment section, so I'll include a link to that in my show notes on my blog. So that way you can see it written out, because that might be more helpful than me just talking through it. And it seems silly to try to show it to you on my phone because screens don't really show up well with the two screens. So today I'm wearing my swan sweater, which I mentioned last time. It's an Anne Kingston pattern, and it's called Wet Wang, which is apparently a Yorkshire town. I knit it out of Cascade Elite's Woodland, which is 65% wool, 35% nettle. And this was the second sweater I knit. I saw this yarn on super sale, and I really liked the color. In case you can't tell, I've got natural light on this side with the windows and lamp light on that side. So things are going to look a little warmer on that side and a little cooler on that side. So this is the true to life color side. I need to pop a daylight bulb in there. I'll try to remember that for next time, now that winter is setting in and lots of overcast days. But back to the sweater. So I found this yarn, and I could not resist getting it because it was made of nettles. And one of my very favorite fairy tales is the Seven Swans. I think it has different names, but basically a girl she has 7 brothers, and her father is the king, and her mother has died, and he remarries, and the stepmother turns out to be a witch, of course, and not a nice witch. And so she casts a spell and transforms the 7 boys into swans, and the sister can free them, but only if she finishes, only if she spins the thread and weaves the cloth and sews shirts for all 7 of them within a certain amount of years. I can't remember. And during this whole time, she's not allowed to speak. And she runs away to the woods, obviously, because she can't live with her evil stepmother anyway. And lots of things happen along the way, and I'll leave you to discover the rest. But because of that, when I saw this colorwork pattern for swans, I knew it would, I couldn't resist. So I have to admit, this is not my favorite sweater. It's the second one I knit. And so basically, I took the yarn and I swatched until I got the gauge the designer called for. But this yarn is, I think, a bit thicker than what the designer's yarn was. So I didn't think about drape. So the yarn is more stiff. And then I'm not sure if it's the nettle content or what, but it tends to start to bag out. Like, I've probably worn it 4 times since I've washed it last, and it's starting to get a bit loose and stuff, so if I want it to fit really well the way it looks in the project photos, I have to wash it and block it every time, which I find tiresome. Not so much the washing, it's the finding a sweater-sized flat surface area that I can let the sweaters dry that kind of annoys me. So I just deal with it being a little baggy. And then also it's too itchy for me to wear without a t-shirt underneath, which is why, another reason why I don't need to wash it all the time. Which surprises me because I'm not particularly sensitive to wool. I don't think it's the nettle content. I think it's just sturdy wool. Or maybe knit, it's such a tight gauge. I don't know. But for those reasons, I find it a little less wearable than my other sweaters, but I still really love it. I love the kind of heathered soft pinks, and I really love the swan design. I think Anne Kingston does the most beautiful kind of, I don't want to say sophisticated, but grown-up animal motifs. I love her bunny one, or rabbit one, from the book I showed you guys last week. So I still have a lot of affection for it. It's just I've definitely learned more since making this sweater. And the only modification I made, because Anne Kingston writes for pretty much my shape, it's really nice. I think I had to move the waist shaping a little because I have a very long torso even though I'm short. But then I added a little bit of color work on the wrists and around the hem. And I just picked this swirly pattern from Mary Jane Mucklestone's book. And it's around the hem too, and it looked a little bit like eggs, so I thought it would be fun. And I did that because I have quite broad shoulders, and so I wanted a little bit of the cream down on the hem to kind of balance the eyes. So that is what I'm wearing this week, and you have now seen all of my cold weather sweaters. I have one summer cardigan, so I guess I better get knitting, huh? I'm drinking a mix of Ceylon and Earl Grey lavender tea. They're both from Davidson's Teas, which is my go-to for organic fair trade stuff. But their lavender tea is super, super lavendery, and I like just a hint. So I mix them together. And now I guess we should talk about finished objects. I only have 2 this week. It's not going to be like last week with the craziness. And they are both Christmas gifts for my niece. So first we have a raccoon, who I think turned out really cute. She's made out of the Knit Picks Reverie, which is brushed baby alpaca, so super soft and fuzzy. And she's made using a Sarah Elizabeth Kellner design, who she makes very realistic stuffed animal designs, which my niece and I both like, and her patterns are all written pretty much seamlessly. So they're fun too. They always use a bunch of short row for shaping. So if you're worried about short rows and you're not really sure about them yet, I mean, you might use one of her smaller designs just for practice. Yeah, so the only modification I made is that in her design, the raccoon face is all white and then the mask goes all the way across, which looks cute, but real raccoons, it's like a 2-piece mask. So all I did was when I was switching colors, I left really long ends to weave in, and then I did duplicate stitch, which I think is also known as Swiss darning or something. So I just basically embroidered knit stitches to make it a little more raccoon-like. And I'm really pleased with how she turned out. She's quite big. You can see, here's my head for comparison. On Instagram, I posted a picture of her next to Thistle, so. Speaking of which, I'm back in my computer chair because one of my viewers, Sarah, said she prefers when I'm closer to the camera so she can see more details. So that's why the pets, Thistle's on the couch and Moth is on the bed. So that's the reason why they're not mobbing me. Let me know. I can always alternate weeks in the armchair, weeks in the computer chair. If some of you like the armchair more, I'm open for whatever. And then the other finished stuffed animal I made is a sloth. Isn't she cute? So this is a Barbara Prime pattern. Both of these were paid for patterns. They were both around $3 though. So, and she's also made in Knit Picks Reverie. Give me a minute. some of the leftover porcini colorway, which I have from, my hat and my gloves and the little baby bunny. Oh, the gray in this is hawk, and then the white is natural, and the black is just called black. So as you can see, they both used white and black. And the pattern was actually written for porcini. It called for that as the body, so that was a really nice coincidence. And my favorite, this is a really cute stuffed animal, but my favorite part is the toes. They're so cleverly done, and there's 3 of them because she's a 3-toed sloth. And I want to see if I can hide her in the Christmas tree hanging with her claws. That'd be pretty fabulous. So Barbara Prime, or at least this pattern, it was written flat and then you seamed it, which I'd never done with a stuffed animal before, and her directions were fabulous. She told you exactly where to attach the arms and legs, because I am notoriously bad at trying to assemble stuffed animals. She told you pretty much how to do the face. The only thing I had to guess was how to embroider the mouth, so I just looked really closely at her photographs. She tells you exactly what technique to use to get this cute little kind of old-fashioned looking effect with the legs. And before I started knitting it, I would have thought that I would find knitting flat and seaming more fiddly than knitting in the round, but really I find them equally enjoyable, because when you knit it flat, then there's no fussing with, small diameter knitting and 4 stitches on each DPN. But then you have to seam it up at the end, so the fiddliness just moves around, and I enjoyed both equally. I don't know when I started enjoying making stuffed animals, because I did not when I first started knitting. My family, I was living in Texas at the time, and yeah, I was notorious for cursing out stuffed animals while I was trying to make them look good. So, I don't know, maybe my stuffed animal skills have improved, or maybe my knitting in general has probably improved. So yeah. So this is the little sloth. I really love her. My mom and sister both really love her too, and they've each requested their own sloths. Her face, the way I embroidered the mouth, kind of reminds me of Poirot, which is my mom's favorite TV show. So I was texting my mom photos and adding little Poirot captions. And then she wanted one, and my sister wants one too. So I have just enough of the porcini colorway left over that I should be able to make 2 more. And she's a little smaller than the raccoon. They're about the same length, but the raccoon is much wider. But I think they're both really nice sizes. The raccoon pattern tells you to stuff it really firmly, so that's why it's nice and big. My niece loves chubby stuffed animals, so. Yep, 2 down. That means I've got a squirrel left to go, and I think the squirrel, it's another one of Sarah Elizabeth Kellner's designs. It's a free one though, and I think it's a little smaller than both of these 2. And then a couple more baby bunnies, because apparently my niece's desire for baby bunnies is endless. And my mom and sister sloths won't be Christmas gifts. They'll just be when I feel like it. And they both knit up pretty quickly too. So good bang for your buck as far as knitted gifts go. Which segues nicely into the topic I wanted to talk about this time, which is gift knitting. Okay, so first of all I should say, I really don't like the phrase selfish knitter. I'll put on my feminist hat for a moment. I'm actually always wearing my feminist hat. It's just sometimes it's a little more obvious. I feel like saying that someone is selfish for pursuing their hobby for themselves is something that only happens with traditionally feminine hobbies. I mean, you wouldn't call someone a selfish golfer, or let's see, a selfish video gamer, but I could see calling someone a selfish sewer, a selfish baker, so I just don't like that. And I don't think that just because you can knit, you should knit for other people. I certainly don't think there's any kind of obligation you have to share your talent. So with that caveat out of the way, I would say I do much more personal knitting, that's what I like to call it, than gift knitting. I actually started tracking so that I could see, and the number of projects is fairly close. I've got more personal projects, but they're within 10 of each other. But if you look at the yardage down at the bottom, I knit much bigger projects for myself, so I knit way more yards of yarn for me than anyone else. That's the way I like it. But I do enjoy knitting gifts for people who I think will enjoy getting them, because first of all, I'm going to spend the money on the gifts anyway, so this way I get a few hours of knitting out of it. And secondly, it's really fun to be able to knit someone something that is exactly what they want, or, matches all of their preferences. I just enjoy that. And I get to knit with colors that I wouldn't necessarily knit with for myself, or like patterns or that kind of stuff. So I do enjoy gift knitting, as long as it's kept in its place. And I would say that most of the time, I don't surprise people. Most of the time, I'd rather give up that enjoyment of a surprise and instead talk with them beforehand so I know that they're going to like the gift. Because even quick knitting takes hours. I consider a project quick if it takes me 6 to 8 hours to do. So, that's a fair chunk of time, and of course yarn costs money. And so I want to make sure that all of that time and money and effort is being spent on something that the recipient will truly enjoy. So I don't knit things for people who won't like hand knits. Even if I think a pattern would work really well in their lives, I don't do that. I don't use yarns that, won't agree with them. Like, some of the people in my life are very, very sensitive to wool, and I love knitting with wool, but I don't knit with wool for them because it would be pointless. So usually I will either, with my niece, we usually do FaceTime so that, because she's just easier to talk to via video, and I'll text her a bunch of photos of different Ravelry patterns, and we'll talk about them together, and I'll text her photos of yarn until we find something that she's going to be really happy with. She's probably the most particular person that I knit for, which is fine with me because I'm also quite particular, so I'm happy to, cater to her specifications. And then the only people who I think I usually surprise with gifts are like my mom, because I know her really well, and she's also one of those people who she's really easy to give gifts to because she really appreciates gifts, and she's not as particular. I say that as someone who is particular, so I'm well aware that I'm probably not the easiest person to give gifts to. And then I've surprised one of my really good friends with gifts because I know, her favorite colors and that kind of stuff, and she also is just easier going. But yeah, so what I really enjoy is working with my recipient and getting an idea for what they want, what will be useful in their lives, and then making it. And so a few things that I've learned is that if you want to get the most bang for your buck, kind of, as far as making, getting a lot of reaction, if you're knitting for a baby shower, stuffed animals go over really well. Like, I think tiny little baby sweaters are cuter than stuffed animals, but the couple of times that I've done baby shower knitting, the stuffed animal has stolen the show. One time I knit a blanket, a stuffed animal, and a little baby vest, and clearly the blanket took the most time, and I only knit that because she's a really good friend and she requested it. I would not surprise someone with a blanket like that. Anyway, but yeah, this little stuffed whale, which was the first stuffed animal I knit, and the cause of much swearing, and my dad finally, on our driving to the baby shower, he was fixing this stuffing for me. Anyway, it was the hit, and everyone was in love with this little whale. So that's something to think about. I would also say I tend to stick to worsted weight yarns with people when I'm knitting because worsted weight just goes more quickly. I knit my mother's socks, and then I've knit my niece fingering mitts and stuff. So some people who are very knit-worthy, I know that they're going to use the gifts a ton and really appreciate them, which would be my mom and my niece. And I'm sure my sister, I haven't knit much for her. Anyway, but basically, if I know that the gift is going to get a lot of use, then I'm willing to put a lot more hours into it by knitting something in smaller yarn. But if I'm just knitting generally, I like the worsted weight or heavier yarn. And then I tend to, if it's not a baby, I think my default gift are hats. I really enjoy knitting hats. They were the first thing I started knitting, and they're still one of the things I enjoy the most. There's only one of them. You don't have to make a matching pair. They're pretty forgiving and fit as long as you get that brim fitted enough and do it in ribbing, you know, but like a small amount of ribbing, then there's a lot of fit forgiveness there, and almost everyone I know wears hats, at least, you know, sometimes of the year. So that has definitely been my default gift knitting. And those are my thoughts on that. Feel free to share your own if you have any go-to patterns or how you feel about personal versus gift knitting and whether you detect the same political overtones in phrases like selfish knitter. And I just poured tea all down my sweater. It's okay, it missed the cream swans. And I needed to wash it anyway. Okay. This is why I had the travel mug going that one time, but I just forgot this time. So, now we will go on to works in progress. It's quite handy having a little outline. Let's see. First are my pointelle socks. Oh my gosh, these have gone so quickly. I've Kitchenered or grafted the first toe shut last night, so I need to cast on for the second one, and I think I only cast on for this like a week ago. It's my first cookie A pattern, and I was expecting it to be really complicated and that I'd have to be looking at the chart all the time, but it actually became pretty intuitive, and every other row is a rest row, so that's really nice. And it was just so fun to watch it develop. I feel like I learned a lot about knitting in general just from watching how she gets all this movement going on, and I have requested her book Sock Innovation from the library, which I know I read when I was a beginner knitter, but now I'm really more tempted to design my own socks, even though I never have before because there's like probably thousands of free downloads on Ravelry, many of which are fabulous, and then there's like tons of sock knitting books at the library, so I have access to a ton of free clever sock patterns, and I just haven't felt much incentive to design my own. But yeah, so there will definitely be more Cookie A patterns in my future, and I would recommend this if you're looking for something that's interesting and requires a bit of attention and some chart reading, but there's also enough restful moments that it just becomes, I think it's a really great balance. And this is in Quince & Company's Finch yarn, which is their fingering, and it's in the lighter of the Natural Heathers, which is Adouin, I believe. There's a lot of vowels in it. And let's see. That side is a bit truer. It's like a cool, creamy, very light gray. It's a sheepy color, basically. I mean, you can see it's not cream the way that the swans are cream. Yeah, I really like knitting, I think I said this last time, but more fancy, frilly, feminine patterns in less feminine colors. I like the juxtaposition there. So, yeah, I will be knitting the second one soon, and I think I knit this exactly to pattern, except, you know, I always do the toe to match my lovely little peasant feet. And then, yeah, usually I do the Eye of Partridge heel flap, but I actually really like this just regular slip stitch heel flap too. I think it looks really nice. So I might be trading off more frequently in my future. And I like to continue the slipping through the heel turn. Sometimes I do it more. This time I just did it through the turn, because if my socks are going to develop holes, it's going to be like right here at the ball of my heel, not here. So I just like to have that extra reinforcement. So, and this is for the Sock Knitters Anonymous group, SKA. Their current theme is fraternal pairs, so there's a bunch of options you can do to knit socks that are similar but don't match, and I'm doing the mirrored pattern option because the idea of having mismatched color or pattern socks freaks me out. I apparently am not quirky enough for that. So yeah, so this is the right sock, and then the left one will be mirrored. So hopefully I'll remember that when I start knitting it. Let's see. I haven't made much progress at all on my little beret, the Gothic inspired one. well, I have made progress, but I'm not quite done with the brim yet. So I think I'm at 14 leaves at the moment, and it looks like I might not actually need 20. I don't know. I'll probably do 4 more, so that'll get me to 18, and then I'll block it to make sure it's not going to stretch a lot, because that would be very sad. And then I'll decide, because I really hate it when hats are trying to fall down on me. So right now it's going to, I don't know if you can see the back of my head, but so maybe I'll only do 2 more and then block it. I had a tricky week as far as errands and exhaustion and that kind of stuff goes, so I just wasn't often in the mood for tiny fiddly work. But I still did a few leaves. I think I had 8 or 9 the last time I showed you, so slow but steady wins the race on that. I'm not in any kind of hurry. I have done a lot of work on my nutmeg shawl, pinch of nutmeg, which is the Cinnamon Grace pattern, free on Ravelry. It's a very shallow crescent shawl. Thought it would ease me into seeing if I can wear shawls because it's more scarf-like. And it's out of the Fiber Company's Road to China Light, which is a sport weight yarn that is some of the most delicious yarn. Oh my gosh. It's a blend of alpaca, cashmere, silk, and camel. And it's funny, I usually knit with pretty much straight up wool blends, maybe some nylon or silk, and alpaca, you know, so I don't usually knit with yarns that blend a lot of different fabrics, or fibers, sorry. But I don't know, I'm definitely interested in trying more of the Fiber Company now because this yarn kind of feels like alchemy, you know, like they balanced everything just right. I mean, it's not even blocked yet and it's already got really beautiful drape. So I finished the body, which is about my height. So a little over 5 feet, or that's what, over 150 centimeters. But right now it's all squished up because once you knit the body lengthwise, oh sorry, the color is like a dark brown. Let's see if the camera's going to cooperate. It's more closer to the windows. This one is being washed out. But it's a beautiful color. And so you knit the body this way, and then once you're done, you go back and you pick up stitches along the one edge. And I really enjoy picking up stitches, but this was like 220 stitches, so it took me a while. And then you pick them up into a purl bump or a garter bump, which I hadn't done before, and I found it a bit fussier than just picking up underslip stitches or just a stockinette selvage. I will say, if you are a continental knitter and you have only tried to pick up stitches with the yarn in your left hand, do yourself a favor and pick them up with the yarn in your right hand, because when I was a beginning knitter, I only knew how to knit continental style, and trying to pick up stitches was the most terrible thing ever. I hated it. Like, I was fighting with it all the time because I was trying to use 2 needles, and then when you knit continental, of course, you're trying to like keep the yarn on as you yank it through. It was a very stressful situation. Whereas when you pick up stitches with the yarn in your right hand, you only need 1 needle. Ooh, and you just, okay, well that's going to be a little tricky, but basically you just pop it over and pull it through, and it's much, much easier. So for any beginning continental knitters out there, save yourself much grief. I'm sure there are a lot of good YouTube videos showing you how. Anyway, so the body is just plain stockinette with garter edging, and then once you pick up the stitches, you double them in the next row to get a little ruffle effect, and then you just do some really simple garter lace. I really like how this is kind of simple, a little old-fashioned, and I'm right at the length that she suggests, but I have quite a bit of yarn left over, so I think I might do a few more rows before doing the bind off. And then I think I'm going to put tassels on the ends because that would be fun. Because I don't think I'm going to have enough yarn left over to make like little matching mitts or anything, so you might as well just use up most of the yarn while you're at it, you know? And yeah, I'm so excited to get this off my needles and to wear it because I think it'll be really nice. I meant to actually put it on another longer cable so that you could see, but oh, Okay, except when you're wearing it, this will actually be the side that's up closer to the neck because the ruffle is bigger. So it's a good size. And yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say about it. Oh, last night I thought, I have a bunch of yarn left over. Instead of doing the picot bind off the pattern suggests, I should try doing some applied edging as a bind off. That would be fun. I tried 3 different lace edgings and none of them looked good. So finally I decided that the pattern writer knew best. I can see myself making this pattern again, and when I pick up the stitches, instead of doing some lace and then binding off, just start with the applied edging right when you pick up the stitches. But yeah, for this one, it's simple. Looks better. I got most of this ruffle done while I was talking with one of my best friends on Thanksgiving. She invited me over, so I made sure I had the stitches picked up and ready to go, and these rows are really long. They're over 400 stitches. So I got enough done that I finished the skein I had brought, and I hadn't brought the 3rd skein. So that was still hours and hours of happy talking and knitting. I've now put a stitch marker in the middle so that instead of trying to knit to the end of the row, which is a little much for me to do without a break, I just knit to the middle, and it has definitely helped my sanity. I'm not used to really giant rows or rounds. And then finally, of course, I have a gift knitting going. And let me take a sip of tea. I thought it might be fun. I was watching back episodes of the Minerva Knits podcast. I'm sorry. I love alpaca, and I can wear it, and it doesn't itch me, but for some reason, whenever I'm showing you guys alpaca projects, my nose starts to itch. I guess I shouldn't make an alpaca balaclava. Anyway, so Minerva Turkey Knit, she has these little Jingle Bell stitch markers, which I thought would be such a fun idea for the holidays. Then I wasn't sure if it would give me a headache, so I wasn't really feeling ordering one and finding out. And then I remembered when I adopted Moth, I bought a cat collar, and I don't make her wear it because she's indoor only, and I live in an apartment building, so if she gets out, it's going to be in the hallway. It's not going to be out in the street. And when I put it on her, it just looks so wrong, you know. Cats are so sleek. Anyway, but the collar came with a bell, so on a jump ring. So I popped it out, and then I just used one of my safety pin, you know, removable stitch markers to attach it to my project. And it's getting me in the holiday spirit, but I will take it off in case you're listening with headphones. Yeah, so I'm enjoying that. I also really enjoy the podcast, Sonic Knitting, maybe? Oh, I'm not going to be able to remember. She's a friend of Kate Davies, and she does a lot of work with sound as well as knitting and soundscapes, and she had an episode where she was talking about bells on her knitting. I'll link it since I apparently can't remember it. Okay, so this is a hat for my mom. It looks like Thistle is going to join us. Give me one sec. Come on, Sadie. We went for a run in some wet and muddy woods, so she's looking a bit more ragged. Oh, she's like too short. Here we go. Ready? There she is. A little. There you are. Say hi. Okay. Back to the hat. Last year I knit a hat using Quince & Company's Chickadee, which is their sport weight yarn, and it was in that same blue with the neck scarf I showed you last week, and I just adapted it from a baby bonnet pattern, and then I used Ann Budd's basic tam recipe, but with a beret you need to increase after the ribbing, and I forgot to increase, so I blocked it anyway, but it turned into a beanie, not a beret, just like a slightly slouchy beanie. And I brought it home for Christmas to get my mom and sister's opinions on it, and then my mom tried it on, and it looked really good on her. So I just gave it to her, and she's really sensitive to wool. Like, pretty much all wool. It freaks her out, and she can't wear it, and she lives in South Texas. But yeah, even most superwash wools, she doesn't like. But for some reason, this hat in Chickadee, which is just regular U.S. wool, I mean, it's soft and stuff, but it's not specially treated. It's not like Cormo. So the Chickadee wool, none of the other Quince yarns, she really likes, and she really enjoys this hat, and she brought it with her when she came to visit me in October, we had a cold snap, and she mentioned that she would really like one in red too. So we looked at the color cards, and we came up with this, which is wine sap. And then she said she wanted the same hat. So the first hat, I had done a folded brim with ribbing on the inside, and then just plain stockinette and a little picot fold. But in my notes, I hadn't written how many stitches I had used to cast on, and I had wanted to surprise her, but then I was afraid that I would get the numbers wrong, because I was looking at the end bed patterns, you know, have tons of different options, and I couldn't remember which one I had used. So last night I called her, and I had her count the little picot tips so that I would know 102 stitches, just because, you know, it won't be a fun surprise if it doesn't fit. So I showed it on Instagram right now. I'm ready to knit both of these together to get the brim folded, but after that I won't be showing it on Instagram because instead of doing it just plain or the other one just had a slight purl pattern, I'm going to use the Starflower hat pattern from Connie Chang Chin Chow's Textured Knitting, which is available as an ebook from my library. And it's a really pretty kind of decorative, little bit of lace, but mainly texture pattern, and I think it'll just shine in Chickadee, which has great stitch definition. And so it goes about that much. And then her pattern, the rest of the hat, like the crown and the top, is knit in ribbing, but I don't really like how it looks, so I'm just going to knit the rest of it in just plain stockinette. And so I think my mom will really like it, and I will block it over a hat again, like I did or over a plate again, like I did the first one, to give it a little more room in the crown. And yeah, so okay, we are doing good on time. So I guess I will show you all of my acquisitions. I placed 2 orders for Christmas knitting, and they both came in, thank goodness. Hey, sweetie. My lap's not so big in this one, huh? So the first order I placed was Knit Picks, and obviously I got 1 each of, oh, this was gonna make a jump for it, there she goes, of gray, which is hawk, for the raccoon, and then black and white, natural and black, for the accents of the raccoon and the sloth. So I'll have plenty of those left over. It took more than half of the ball for the raccoon. I think it took 35 out of the 50 grams. So I wouldn't be able to get 2 out of that, but I can certainly get a couple baby bunnies if I want to. And then this is the Hawthorne Fingering Speckle that I thought my niece might like a pair of socks or arm warmers out of, but no, she wants a squirrel out of it, so I'll be holding it double. That's pretty true to life. And then I mentioned whenever I order yarn for gifts, I usually end up ordering myself some yarn too. And I haven't really tried any Knit Picks yarns other than the Reverie, so I got some Hawthorne kettle dye, because the last brown socks I made, the brown color is so cool, it doesn't go with my shoes, and I love kettle dyes. So this one, as you can see, it's different shades of warm chocolatey browns that will go fine with my shoes. And it's really pretty, so we'll see. I prefer regular wool to superwash wool, and pretty much every sock yarn is superwash if it's marketed as sock, as this one is. So that's why I really like using the Quince fingering ones as socks. But unfortunately, even though they have the same yardage as other sock yarns, they're somehow, I don't know if they're bouncier or just the way I knit, but I can almost never get 8 stitches to the inch. Instead I get 7.5, and I have quite small feet to begin with. They're only 8 inches around. So if you knit a sock with 10% negative ease, and you're knitting at 8 stitches to the inch, you're already, really, I should be doing like 58 stitch socks, but I don't. Usually I do 60 to 64, because that's what patterns are written for. It's really difficult to find a pattern for a sock under 60 stitches. So that's why I'm still looking for a good sock yarn that's on the thinner side for when I find those really elaborate patterns. But that's also part of why I want to start designing my own socks. And then finally, I placed this order when they were doing their sale. It wasn't Black Friday, it was like last week. But, so this one is Gloss Fingering in the Velveteen colorway. The brown one is the Fawn colorway. and the speckle is aquatic speckle, in case you're curious. And it's a really pretty mauve, and I got 150-gram skein of it. So it's 220 yards. It's 70% merino, 30% silk, so it's not super wash. But I got it to pair with this. So I got this Regia yarn a few months ago when I decided I really wanted to try out patterned or variegated yarns. But then I was looking at the label, and I don't really like how it's pooling instead of striping. So my plan is to use a sock pattern whose name I did not write on my handy outline. But, oh, it's the broken seed stitch pattern. So it'll alternate, so it'll combine these two. And the Regia, it's mainly blues and grays. I'm having a hard time showing it. But see how there's little specks of pink in there, or mauve? There's really small, short ones. So I thought that they would make a really nice combination together. Sorry, I'll add the daylight bulb for next time. Okay, and then the quince order arrived because I like quince, so I shop with them. If they had a brushed alpaca yarn, I would totally buy that. And I got 2 skeins of the chickadee and wine sap for my mom's hat. The first hat I made took 1 skein, but it took the whole skein. So I just wanted to not have to worry about yardage. And I mean, this is like a Christmassy red, so I figured if I have one left over, I can do ornaments or that kind of stuff, or make my mom a pair of fingerless mitts, although she lives in South Texas. But hey, it was like 42 when I was talking to her earlier this morning, so. And then for my dad, basically it's a Christmas of hats and stuffed animals. I'm going to make him a hat to match his mittens that were color work in this brown, which is owl tweet. So it's 50% wool, 50% alpaca. It's prettier. It's got some really pretty depths in it. And for the mittens, I combined it with hemlock, which is a dark pine green, because they were for him to go hunting with, so he's going to be in the woods. And he really likes his mittens. He's reported to me how fabulous they are. But when he saw the color combination, he said, "Oh, Christmas. Brown and green? Really? Okay." I think because the pattern I used was I just forgot the word. Where it's zigzags or V's. So I don't know. Something about that said Christmas. So I'm just going to knit plain brown for a matching hat. And I've already found the hat I want to knit on Ravelry, and it seems like, my dad is a bigger guy. He's not fat. He's just like, when we measured his hands for the mittens, he definitely was the men's large. So I figure he needs a men's large hat, and it's one that uses a lot of ribbing, and I think it'll look really cool, and it's got some cool crown stuff, but I can't remember the name. You can see it in my queue. I'll link to my queue. Yeah, I love how this smells. It's a more rustic yarn. And it's woolen spun instead of worsted spun, so even though it's alpaca, it's not super drapey like the other alpaca I've knit with is. Instead, it's very lofty and warm. And then finally, my brother-in-law, so that would be my sister's husband. I only have one sister. He is really into beer. He's just started a company that does tours of craft breweries in the Texas Hill Country. And so I found this really fun free colored chart for bottles of beer and then pint glasses of beer. So I'm going to make him a beanie with so there'll be ribbing and then just one row of the beer motif. I think my sister and I have agreed we're going to do the pint glass one, and then the rest plain. And I'm knitting this in fingering, the quince finch, because South Texas, you don't really need a worsted hat in South Texas. And I picked Sabine, which is the darkest of their heathers, so it's almost a black, but just a little more interesting, because he looks really good in black. I consulted my sister, and she agreed. And then I couldn't resist ordering their new fox as the accent color. It's not quite as orange as it's showing up on the screen, so I think it'll work as beer, the medium colored beer. But really, it's only going to take a few yards, so that's why I wanted a color that I could do something fun with the leftovers. And Fox is one of their new shades. I'm really excited about all their new shades. But they don't have color cards available yet with the new shades, so that's why I kind of had to guess. I'm sure it'll look good though, and then I'll just use some leftover white yarn for like the glass and the foam. You can see that in my Q2. And finally, for myself, I got a skein of Elf because, so after I knit my dad's mittens, I knit myself a hat with the dark green hemlock. And I have a whole skein left over because it just took less than I expected. So I ordered 3 skeins expecting my dad's mittens to take over one, and then, I mean, the hat has a bunch of cables on it. But somehow this yarn magically goes really far. So I'm going to use that skein and this one to make a pair of colorwork mittens for myself. I'm really excited about this. It's this really cool rabbit pattern, or really they look more like hares. And they kind of look really outdoorsy and in the forest. It's in my queue, but yeah, so this is the Elf colorway. It's like a light sheepy gray. A lot of their undyed colors are sold out, but I think this one will be great. Hemlock is a deep dark green, so there will be lots of contrast. And it'll look kind of moonlit. I'm really excited about those mittens. Of course, I probably won't knit them until January at the earliest because it's most of my Christmas knitting. I still need to make the second of the salamander mittens, too. And then my sister's Christmas present is going to be me promising to knit her a sweater. I'm thinking the Hito Fude, but I won't actually knit it until the summer because it'll be knit in a non-wool yarn. So that'll be nice when it's hot here and I don't have air conditioning. But yeah. Whew. Okay. Woohoo, we came in at 45 minutes. I will really quickly do a book review because I love books. This is knitting related, but it's not like only for knitters, and you're not going to learn how to knit or get patterns. It's called Women's Work, The First 20,000 Years by Elizabeth Wayland Barber. She is an archaeologist, and basically this is a very cross-disciplinary book written for a popular audience, so it's really enjoyable to read. And she's very interested in textiles because that's what women spent most of their time doing for most of history. And of course, textiles don't survive in the way that metalwork and even pottery and shards do. So some of it is about how academics are exploring textiles, and then a lot of it is just about textiles throughout history. And reading this is when I learned that nettles were actually used like linen, the way that they were treated so they didn't sting you. I mean, they might have stung you if you picked them wrong, obviously. But yeah, so they were treated a lot like linen. And there's just all kinds of really interesting facts in here. It's more about weaving because throughout most of history, weaving has created fabric way more than knitting. But yeah, it's really, really enjoyable, really well written. So if you're at all interested in history, especially social history and the history of people in the margins, which would be most women throughout most of history, then I think you would really enjoy this. So give it a go, maybe as a break from your own holiday knitting. And that is everything. So I will see you guys next week. Eventually I go home for Christmas, so there will be a break, but it won't be for another week or two, I think. A couple weeks, really. And I had a really good time unpacking my knitting basket with you. I hope that you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave comments either in the group or on YouTube or on my blog or email me. I respond to all of that because I love talking about knitting, and I don't have any other people in my local life who are as interested in it as I am. So I get that online. And if you're interested in following along with my projects as they progress, I would recommend my Instagram feed. That's where I do the most updates. And of course, go to my blog for show notes. And now I'm drawing this out way too long, so I'll see you guys next week. Bye.